Okay, by the time you've seen this video, you've probably already watched Kebab's video on rates, you've probably watched Mr. Steele's video on rates, you've probably watched Joshua Bardwell's video on rates. And I've watched all those too and more. And the reason I'm doing this video is because I wanted to start from zero, from ground zero, as if you know nothing about beta flight or what rates are and all that. And we're gonna go step by step so that you can follow along and not just understand the concepts, but to be able to do it for yourself step by step. Okay, so one great thing about FPV quads is our ability to set rates. So what this is basically adjusting how our controls work relative to the quad. So in most toys or gadgets, we're forced to learn how that product behaves based on the remote they give us and the sensitivity of that remote. But with FPV quads, there's a lot of customization that we can do. So what we're trying to do essentially is change the behavior of the quad based on our expectations and our tendencies as we're using the transmitter or the remote control. And so one word that's always tossed around that may be confusing or you may not be aware of is the word resolution. So resolution basically means the travel of the sticks. So high resolution means that you're moving the sticks to the far corners or far perimeter of as far as the sticks move during your entire flight. You're able to go full resolution, meaning you're able to move the sticks all the way up and all the way down, all the way left, all the way right. Low resolution means that you're moving the sticks very little and concentrating mostly in the center. So what we're going to do is we're going to try to aim for high resolution, and we're going to adjust that accordingly if you need to. So step one is actually we're going to adjust the super rate, okay? Not the rate, not the expo, but the super rate. The reason why we're starting with super rate as opposed to rate is because our adjustments in super rate will have a drastic increase or decrease in the overall degrees per second of the quad. So we're going to use that first, and then we're going to fine tune with the rate. Okay, so in beta flight, it's going to be in the columns. The first column is going to be rate, super rate, and then expo. So we're going to ignore rate right now, and we're going to start with just super rate. Before we get into that, I do want to note that you probably already heard that when you adjust either rate, super rate, or expo, it will change the behavior of the other columns, and you may have to adjust those accordingly. So there may be some back and forth. But number one, we're going to start with super rate, okay, the middle column. And the idea, what you're going to do is you're going to set the super rate such that when you do a full roll, you're comfortable with that. Okay, so what does that mean? That means as you're moving the sticks and you're doing a full roll, it may do the roll too quickly, it may do the roll too fast, it may require more resolution than your mind is expecting, or it may require too little than what you're expecting. So the idea is, rather than trying to figure out what it should be, you change it to what your normal expectation is of how the quad should behave. Okay, so what we're gonna do is we're gonna adjust the super rate. Normally out of the box, super rates range, I think, from 0.75 to 0.78-ish. And so if you find that when you're trying to complete a full roll, that the quad is turning too quickly or completing that roll too quickly, or you're overcompensating, then you're going to drop your super rate down by about 2 notches, meaning you're going to drop by 0.02. So say for instance it's 0.75 and you feel that it's too fast, that when you're doing that roll, you're doing more than 360-degree roll, that you're doing a little bit more when you only mean to do a single roll. Then you're going to drop it from 0.75 to like 0.73. And then you're going to keep doing that accordingly until you feel that there's a comfortable point where you can move the sticks to what your natural tendency or natural expectation is, and you're able to complete that roll. Okay, so when you do that, you're going to go back into beta flight and you're going to check the degrees per second. Degrees per second. So you're going to look at the degrees per second and just make note of that. Okay, we're not gonna get too technical. We're not gonna throw up screenshots of beta flight, because I want you to concentrate on the concepts so that you can understand the concepts, because sometimes we get too into beta flight and then it gets too technical, but we want to understand the concepts before we move any further. Okay, so you're gonna set, again, we're gonna set super rate so that when you do a complete roll, that it's comfortable. So that when sometimes your stick movement, you think needs to go slower or needs to go faster than it really is. So do what's comfortable and adjust it so that the quad behaves how you expect it to behave, rather than you trying to learn how sensitive it should be, okay? So that's step one, is super rate. I figured it might be helpful to use the transmitter and my fingers to show you what I mean by resolution and how you're adjusting super rate. So for some people, when they're completing a full roll of their quad, it may look like this. And other people might look like this. And others might look like this. So you'll notice the first time the stick went all the way to the end for maybe a little bit over a second. And the second time was much quicker. And the third time it didn't even go all the way to the end. So this would be low resolution, this would be high resolution. As high resolution means that you're going to the outer perimeters during your flight. And low resolution means that you're only using most of the center. Okay, so when you're flying and you're adjusting your super rate, you're obviously not looking at the transmitter while you're flying, right? But you're gonna realize that when you're flying and you're doing a full roll, and whatever it might be, however your fingers are moving and however you're feeling inside of what you think you're doing to complete a roll, use that to adjust your super rate. So if I go like this and to complete a roll, but I find that it's doing more than a single resolution, then I'm gonna lower the super rate. If I go like this and it's not quite doing a full roll, then I wanna increase the super rate, okay? So you obviously don't need to look at the remote while you're flying, but just in your head, the idea of what you're doing versus what you're experiencing with the quad. If the quad is not moving quick enough, then you're gonna increase the super rate. If it's not, or if it's moving too slow, or sorry, if it's moving too fast, then you're gonna decrease the super rate. Okay, so there's nothing wrong with some people doing a roll like this and other people doing a roll like this and others doing like this. So those differences are very minor, but as you're flying, you're gonna have that tendency or expectation of how the quad is supposed to perform as you're moving the sticks. So you're gonna adjust that accordingly. Step two is you're gonna adjust your rate, the first column, okay? There's rate, super rate, expo. Step two is you're gonna adjust the rate, which is the first column. And as you're flying, the question you're gonna ask yourself is, how steady is the quad? Is it bobbing up and down during slow movements? So what you're gonna do is you're gonna fly the quad low to the ground, very low. We're talking like 3 feet, 4 feet, okay? It's nothing exciting, it's nothing dramatic. You're gonna fly in an area that you're comfortable with. You're not looking for good images. You're not looking to capture any video where you're gonna show your friends. It's gonna be boring, very, very boring, because you're trying to set your rates and you wanna have a consistent environment that you're gonna fly in. So again, you're gonna adjust rate. And as you're doing that, you're gonna make sure that the quad is flying smoothly. Smoothly meaning not up and down. So if you're flying and then you're trying to go straight and it tends to go up and down, then that means your rate is too high and you wanna drop your rate again by 0.02 at a time. So if out of the box it's 0.06 and you find it too jittery, then you're gonna drop it to 0.04. And then if it's still too jittery, you're gonna drop it to 0.02 and then further and further down. So don't get too caught up in what other people's rates are. I will share mine at the end of the video, and that's just for your curiosity, but you should really be doing this to what your tendencies and expectations are and what's natural for you. So again, as the quad is flying through the air, you're gonna stay at a low elevation. And if the quad tends to bob up and down, especially when you're trying to land, then you're gonna drop your rate by 0.02. Okay, you're gonna drop the rates for all the axes. And so that is step 2, okay? First we adjusted super rate so that we can complete a roll that's comfortable for us. And then step 2, we adjust the rate so that our quad is not bobbing up and down. As you drop your rate, you will notice that you may need to change your super rate because now your degrees per second has dropped accordingly. So what you're gonna do is, after that step 2 of adjusting your rate, you're gonna fly the quad through 3, 5, 6, 7, 8 packs. And then you're gonna do what you don't wanna do. And that is you're gonna experience some quad separation anxiety. Yes. You're gonna put the quad down and you're gonna take a break for a day. It's important that you take a break for a day so that when you revisit the next day, what you're gonna do is you're gonna pick up the quad, you're gonna charge your batteries, and you're gonna watch TV, you're gonna do whatever you do, and it's only the next day or the following day they're gonna get back on the quad. And you're gonna fly it as is. And how you react to how the quad flies after the first day of adjustment will be very, very, very telling of what you need to do from that point on. So as you're flying it that next day, pay very close attention to how you're reacting to the quad. You know, you may be flying the second day and you're like, whoa, this is way too jittery, or wait, this is way too soft, or I need too much resolution to complete this one move. So that response, again, is very telling, and you're gonna adjust accordingly. Again, super rate so that you can do a complete roll comfortably, and you're not finding that you have to move the sticks too quickly or move the sticks too slowly. And then you're gonna adjust the rate so that you can fly smooth in the up and down axis so that you're not jittery, and especially when landing. So once you get that super rate and rate set on that second day, you're gonna fly through more packs. Okay, this isn't a UAV tech experiment where you can adjust your PIDs in like 3 packs. Nothing wrong with that. This is not PIDs, this is rates. And so with rates, I think you need to be a little bit more patient. When you're adjusting PIDs, you're probably already experienced enough to a level where you can kind of understand a little bit more and you can do that more quickly. But when you're adjusting your rates, which is kind of your primary basis, you're gonna wanna take your time, okay? So we are on day 2 where you've readjusted rates and super rate. The next thing we're gonna do is as you're flying, you're gonna ask yourself, how smooth is the quad during tight maneuvers or through gaps or through small areas? If you find that you're trying to fly under a tree branch or between legs of a chair or whatever it is, and the quad is just moving around too much, that means your rate is too high still. So you're gonna drop your rate further so that during the middle portion of the sticks, that it is smooth and that you can move the sticks a little bit in the middle and not have the quad react to every single jitterness of your fingers. Some of you may be wondering why I'm recommending to lower all your rates of the roll axis, the pitch axis, and the yaw axis when the quad is moving or jittering up and down, as opposed to using a throttle limit. So yes, you can use the throttle limit as well, or you can scale the throttle. However, I would recommend using that as more fine-tuning. If you find that your quad is really going up and down too much, it really does mean that your regular rates are too high. If you can drop those rates so that you can feel comfortable without adjusting the throttle limit or throttle scale, then that'll be ideal, and you can start adjusting the throttle limit or throttle scale afterwards. Some of you might be confused on why dropping your rate will adjust how jittery the up and down motion is. Because technically our rates are pitch, roll, and yaw, not throttle. So if your quad is going up and down, that seems like a throttle thing. But for whatever reason, if you drop your rates, you're gonna feel the smoothness of the quad is in this direction, even though this is not rolling and this is not flipping and this is not yaw. But you'll find if you lower your rates and you move a little bit, or you're jittery or not consciously moving the center stick, that your quad will stay more steady. So you're gonna drop your rate until you can fly smoothly in this direction. When you're going through and doing your maneuvers or whatever, and again, particularly when you're landing softly, that it's not going like this. Sometimes when we're landing, that is a big giveaway of how jittery our quad is relative to our control. So if you're landing and you find you don't want to smack too hard, so then you're moving your throttle up and then you find it coming up really quickly, that means your rate is too high and you're going to drop all of the rates, yaw, pitch, and roll. And again, you'll find it to be smoother in this direction. Third thing we're going to talk about is expo. So what expo does is it basically numbs the center stick. Okay, it numbs the center stick. So the super rate and the rate together create a degrees per second, that last number that we talked about. And that may range anywhere from 450 to 1200, 1500, whatever it might be, whether you're doing race or freestyle, indoors or outdoors. So when you're doing that, expo will not change the degrees per second. What expo does is it changes at what point in the travel of the sticks where you start to see a huge jump in the response of the quad versus the input of your fingers. So I'll kind of repeat that. What expo does is it numbs down or dumbs down the point at which your quad reacts or behaves wildly during turns or rolls or flips versus normal kind of cruising, which is at the center stick. I thought it might be helpful to talk about expo in terms of the transmitter. So what expo does is it creates softness in the center stick. So people like to have expo so that when you're making fine maneuvers like under chairs or through small gaps, that this little movement doesn't move the quad a whole lot. Because if you have this center stick too sensitive, what happens is people tend to overcompensate. So it's drifting too far to the right and then you go left, then instead of coming back to center, it'll go really far. So by having high expo or expo at all, what it does is it softens the middle so that it's less sensitive. Less sensitive means the quad does not move as much when you're in the center stick area. So since expo does not change the total degrees per second, by having expo and having this center stick soft and not responding to the quad or creating big input in quad activity in the middle of the stick, what happens is from here, say your expo affects this portion, then from here to here to here, has an extreme response to the quad. So here, very little response to the quad. And then from here to here, even though the resolution here is not a lot, it'll have a big impact in how the quad moves because you created expo here. So if you have a lot of expo, what happens is you have more resolution in the middle that is soft. But that comes at the expense of, at the very ends, from here to here, that movement, even though it's not very much, will create a huge impact and the quad will respond drastically from a very small point of the resolution. So maybe another way to describe expo is that expo puts a point between your center stick and your outside stick. Let's call it that. So if you have low expo, then this portion will be the softness of the quad and not having a lot of reaction to the quad. And the moment you come outside of that normal circle here, like here, then you're gonna have huge response. If you have high expo, what happens is you have a bigger center circle that has not as much movement, or doesn't translate into as much movement of the quad, but the moment you get further out, then you're gonna see huge impact. So high expo, big center stick area. Low expo, small center stick area. I realize expo is a difficult concept to explain, so I'm gonna try it in a different way, and then maybe some of you will understand it better this way than looking at the transmitter. So these circles are gonna be the black part of the transmitter itself. So how far you can move the stick. So physically, you can only move it as far as this outside line in both these scenarios. So when you have low expo, what that does is the center stick portion is, the center zone is smaller. In high expo, the center zone is larger, okay? So in this little circle, when you're moving the stick in that circle, the quad will not move as drastically. The moment you move the stick outside the circle, the quad will move drastically, okay? So in contrast with high expo, you have a larger soft zone or larger center stick zone. So when you're moving the stick, you have higher resolution in the center for the quad to not really move as drastically. The moment you get outside of this circle, from here to here, the quad does move drastically. So it's a trade-off, right? Because this circle is the same size on the outer circle, same size here as here, because it's physically limited by the transmitter itself. Expo only changes how soft the center stick is and what size the zone of the center stick or softness is. So hopefully that was another way to explain it. Some of you may understand that better, and some of you may have understood the other example better. But anyway, that was my shot at trying to explain expo. So the center stick to kind of the outside resolution is where the expo comes in play. Now you know how to adjust your rates by starting with super rate, then expo, okay? And I promised you earlier in the video that I would tell you about my own rates, okay? So I did what you probably did and checked out other people's rates and started with those at different profiles. So I can switch back and forth and say, you know, how do I feel about this? How do I feel about that? And at the end of the day, what I came up with is my personal rate is for all accesses about 1.03 to 1.04 for rate. Super rate for me is 0.76 to 0.78 depending on the quad. And my expo is 0.15 to 0.22, again, depending on the quad. Because different quads will have different voltages and different sag levels, and that does come into play with the different quads. And so I do prefer fairly different rates for different quads. That's it for the video. So hopefully that kind of explained how to adjust your rates. If you have any questions, feel free to leave comments below. If you have any sort of criticisms in how I explain this, or if you have anything to add, please leave that in the comments below to help out the community and people watching this video. All right, so hopefully that helped you out. We'll check you out next time. Take care, bye-bye. Do not adjust your rates while you're in angle mode or horizon mode. When you're adjusting rates and you're fine tuning and kind of getting your basis, you really want to do this in acro mode. So the reason being is because both angle mode and horizon mode limits the angle at which the quad moves. So you may experience that if you have high rates in angle mode or horizon mode, that it's not actually the rates that you're seeing that you're experiencing. It's actually the limitations of the angle mode and horizon mode that's limiting you. So you may find that if you did try to adjust your rates in angle mode or horizon mode, that they're super high. Because when I did it, I spent so much time, so many hours, so many batteries adjusting rates in angle mode, which is not what you want to do. So once I got into acro mode with those rates, I couldn't fly because everything was just so sensitive. So again, angle mode and horizon mode have their own limits already set in by the nature of those modes, that when you set your rates around there, it's not going to help you. So just make sure that when you're adjusting rates that you're in Acro mode only.